Help me understand the impact of the war in Syria on the country's children. Can you describe that impact for me?
Yeah, from my knowledge, I'm not sure what the number is now, but about 1 million people have fled the country to the neighboring countries in the area, such as Jordan, Turkey, Iraq, and Lebanon. And majority of those, a great amount of those refugees happen to be women and children. A lot of the men in the family either stay to participate in the war or unfortunately have been killed.
What do you feel the media is not reporting well enough when it comes to humanitarian crisis?
Right now, it all depends. I think a lot of it, oftentimes it becomes very political, so the media chooses to report news that they want to report. So oftentimes you may not hear anything about what's going on in Syria, but there could be a lot going on. There's a lot of activity and there's been a lot of killings, but they don't give you any updates because of their own political reasons and their own political agenda. So it all depends on the prerogative of the news station. If at that time they want to, report the news, but I think generally speaking, the world is kind of all tuned into what is happening in Syria. So even if the United States isn't reporting the news, other countries are.
Why do you feel the media is not reporting the crisis?
Like I said, oftentimes it's very political, and it has to. Oftentimes they don't want to report the crisis because they don't want the viewers to have an idea of what's going on abroad for whatever reason, and sometimes they don't report specific news because they don't have a vested interest in that news. It doesn't really benefit them at all. So they feel, this is my personal opinion, but I think oftentimes they feel like, why would I report it if it doesn't affect us personally? For example, when there was a lot of when there was a lot of speculation of who let off a chemical weapon, who used the chemical weapon during the Civil War, was it the Army, was it the rebels? When the United States was considering intervening and going into Syria, at that moment there was a lot of news coverage around the Syrian Civil War because at that time the United States was involved.
How did you first come to learn about the crisis going on in Syria?
It was about 2.5 years ago. I think it's been almost 2 years. This has been an ongoing conflict. I heard about it initially just through my family, and that's kind of, like I said, my mother is from Syria, so a lot of my family is kind of keeping up to date with what's going on in Syria. So that's kind of how I heard about the revolution. Initially, I also heard about it. This was during the time of the Arab Spring. That was very popular. So I was learning about the Arab Spring in school, and I try to stay up to date on international current events and up to date on social issues and some political issues. So just reading about it in the news, hearing about it through my family, and hearing about it in class.
Finally, is there anything I didn't ask you about this crisis in Syria that you think I should know?
I think that it's very complicated. It's a very complex situation, conflict with many different layers and many different facets that are affecting the conflict. Like I said, oftentimes it's very political. I would say be careful, just be cognizant of the news that you're listening to, and make sure that it's not biased, because oftentimes news can be very biased. Make sure you're hearing different perspectives from different news outlets, so you can kind of navigate through the bias and form your own opinion. I think it's a shame. I mean, obviously, just with the refugees and now the Syrian revolution which is a war, civil war, has kind of affected the neighboring countries around Syria, so they're being affected by it. The refugees, specifically the children, the women who have fled the country. Yeah, I would encourage you to kind of form your own opinion, do your own research, navigate through the bias. And from what I've learned, it's very complex. You have all these different militia groups, and you don't know why they're fighting. You know, what are the reasons for fighting? Try to get to the source of how the revolution started. You'll hear different opinions on how it started, depending on who's giving you that information. Once again, because of their own agenda. And yeah, try to filter through the propaganda and I would encourage you to inform your friends, inform your peers, your family, and relatives about what's happening in the world, not only domestically in the United States, but all throughout the world, because it does affect us. You know, we're all connected in some way. Everything is becoming globalized, and we're all connected. So even though it's happening in the Middle East, it's affecting us, and I think it's important for us to be aware and to be aware of what's happening, because we may have a voice. We may be able to have an impact of some sort if we're educated on what's happening and we're aware.